Hi, this is Keena Kim with PivotalDiscovery.com. Today we're here with Vincent Nalin, who's the Litigation Support Manager at Kilpatrick and Stockton, and we're at ILTA09. And Vince comes from a very unique background where he was a vendor and he's now with a law firm. So he's going to share his decision of moving from the vendor side to the law firm, and also the law firm's perspective in looking for someone with your background and qualifications.
Thank you for having me. It was a very interesting perspective coming from the vendor side to the law firm side. One of my former bosses on the vendor side actually indicated that the uniqueness was going to be with every partner that you dealt with. And so all those partners run their own enterprises in a law firm environment, so there really is no standard. Of course, vendors try and set standards and create standard methods of intaking new matters and processing information, and the output is expected to be the same every time. Whereas in the law firm world, you never quite know what you're going to get into depending on the area of law that you're talking about or depending upon the type of case that you're involved in. Therefore, we have to be very flexible in the law firm world, and it's difficult to have sort of a standard and a single way of doing things. So we often have, in the 80-20 rule is often at play. We try and standardize about 80% of our cases, have a standardized way of going through the data, standard ways of getting data into document review, and especially on the eDiscovery side. But then there's always that 20% that at the very end of the day, somebody has to have millions of pages produced by the following morning, or a surprise documents arrive from a vendor that you never knew existed. And developing some strategies around that is really where we've been able to play the most valuable and provide the most value to our clients and to our firms.
So in terms of the tools that currently exist and don't, what are some of the tools that would better help you in your job?
We've really been working with project management tools over the last year and incorporating some of those that are already for the market. I think the overall dynamic of a law firm and the efficiencies that now must have as part of that environment have demanded that the attorneys seek out people that have more technical credentials than traditional law firm employees do, right. And that some of the efficiencies that you have in a vendor environment would be welcome in a law firm. So they recognize the firm's emphasis on eDiscovery and how critical it is to do it right and do it well and do it consistently have led them to look toward the vendor arena and towards people with technology backgrounds who also could garner that appreciation for the legal process. And that combination, I think, is what led me to the firm as well.
And for other people who are looking into litigation support as a career, who come from maybe more of a traditional technology background and don't have the vendor sales background, what are some suggestions that you can make in terms of them transitioning into a role such as yours with a law firm or going into a sales position, let's say, with a vendor?
I think there's a lot of value in going to a vendor and learning about a lot of the technology behind the scenes. The technology, while it appears the same as what you would see in an IT world, there are far deeper concentrations of technology within documents that you have to be knowledgeable of in the vendor world that you wouldn't necessarily have to in the IT world. So you're talking about storage and you talk about documents and whatnot in an IT world, but in a vendor world you're concerned about the metadata and the associated underlying information. So that knowledge before you get into a law firm is really, really critical, and most law firms would require that.
Great. And do you see a difference in terms of how you present your information or proposals to the attorneys now that you're internal in a law firm versus when you were a vendor?
You do. It's much like the IT environment when you are on the vendor side. You're trying to solve a problem. An attorney is in a situation, they've contacted you as a vendor, and hence you are trying to solve a problem for them that is pretty easily defined. Now in the law firm world, you get that, but more often than not, you're trying to get attorneys to think proactively, and there are probably a core group of individuals who do think proactively about eDiscovery and its impact on the firm. Mm-hmm. And so you're not only handling the emergency right now, but you're also handling going ahead, sort of a forward-thinking strategy as well. So it's much more forward-thinking in a firm as opposed to sort of the day-to-day, help me get out of this jam from the vendor side.
Right, and previously we were talking a little bit about the different applications out there. Can you give us your perspective on what you see as being the big or little differences, and what's important for you in the selection and continuous relationship in working with a vendor?
What's really important to us is sort of the ongoing support of an application. Is the vendor there in the trenches with us when we're in the trenches with our attorneys and trying to figure out why an anomaly has happened, or trying to understand exactly what the application is doing behind the scenes that might be causing us some problems. Mistakes happen. Everybody's going to make a mistake, whether it's us as a firm or the technology, as it says, doesn't quite deliver as promised. And so, you know, as a firm, we may wait to the last minute to give some instructions, or we may not know the ramifications of the type of data that we're going to get. So we rely on the vendor, and we put pressure on the vendors to solve that problem for us. And those vendors that step up and will really you know, raise the bar in terms of service and supporting us, and recognize that we don't always know what we're getting because we're getting second or third hand knowledge from our client or the opposing side. So it's often a very valuable exercise to go through a vendor and know your vendors very well before you start sending them data.
Right. So in terms of the technology, do you see any really tremendous fundamental differences in the offerings that are currently available?
There's been a strong movement toward early case assessment. That's one of the overflowing themes here at ILTA, and the desire to keep people, to give people that look into the data before you get into the process and you've wasted money. And these economic times are causing people to really take a look at things before they commit to what they're going to spend. And I think a lot of the vendors here are starting to answer the call in terms of being able to provide that early look and let you make some intelligent decisions early on.
Right. In terms of, you know, obviously with the economy the way it is, cost is a pretty big consideration. In sharing this information with the attorneys about the upfront versus, and as well as the continuing cost, you know, how do you deal in sharing with them the value proposition for the price tag?
I think the attorneys of all the people in the litigation support audience, the attorneys understand the value proposition better than anyone, and they get increasing pressure from their clients to reduce fees and to make sure that they're doing things in the most efficient way possible, and they in turn look to their internal support staff to do the same thing. And as long as you can marry what you're doing with what they're trying to provide to their clients, it's an automatic win. There's not really a whole lot of discussion. If you know, there's traditional things that now in this economy are having to change. The storage of data is one. A lot of law firms struggle with all the data that is involved in litigation, especially the large litigations. So a traditional firm might not have charged their client and looked at it as overhead. But now, when litigation support data, you know, 1 gig in can wind up being 10 gigs out, in terms of by the time you do productions, by the time you expand it and go through the data in a thorough manner. So the economies of scale exist that you've got to find somebody that has that type of capability, but not at a risk of shutting down your own internal email systems and environments for document management. So that can lead you down that road as well.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vince.
Thank you.